was specifically heavily requested at our AMPS conference last year. So I think this was the most popular suggestion in terms of what people wanted to see covered in our AMP series. So this is actually the last session of the year. So it's really nice to finish on this note with a very popular topic, and that is careers in music psychology. And really, we couldn't get a more apt topic for this particular group in this particular series. So I want to thank everybody for that suggestion. And of course, I want to particularly thank our presenters. So we have Margaret Osborne and Mary Broughton. And we're going to treat this more like a panel or a discussion. I've got some questions that I can ask, but really this session is for you guys to make the most of the fact that we have Marg and Mary on the call here today to give us some insight into what their experience has been in building a career in music psychology, to give us some idea of what the pathways are, and so really kind of tap into that that collective wisdom that we have here today. So with our presenters, I just wanted to briefly introduce Margaret Osborne. She holds an interdisciplinary appointment with both the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences and the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music, and her desire to support the mental and physical health needs of artists to achieve optimal performance and sustainable careers has seen her develop new curricula in performance psychology, serve as an associate editor for Frontiers in Psychology Performance Science, past president of the Australian Society for Performing Arts Healthcare, and she maintains a consulting psychology practice. Marg is notable for research in music performance anxiety. She seeks to understand how learning and performance can be improved using self-regulated learning and emotion regulation skills, elucidating best practice methods to build confidence, health, and resilience in order to maximise performance potential in music and other performing arts, sports, public, and academic disciplines, public speaking and academic disciplines. And Mary Broughton is a percussionist and researcher in the psychology of music, which involves applying psychological science theory and methods to study human thought, feeling, and behaviour in relation to music. Her research focuses on music perception and cognition, action and interaction through music performance, audience engagement and development, music in the early childhood period, and promoting individual and community well-being through active participation in music performance. As a percussionist, Mary has performed with orchestras such as the Queensland Symphony Orchestra and West Australian Symphony Orchestra, and has performed nationally and internationally as a chamber and solo musician. Mary established and currently leads the Psychology of Music program area at the University of Queensland's School of Music. So, as you can see, we have some really great expertise here with Marg and Mary. And I wanted to kick off the conversation today by asking, I'll start with Marg, what inspired you to get into music psychology, and can you tell us a little more about your background?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Melissa. And thank you to AMPS for inviting me to be a part of this seminar or panel. It feels I feel privileged and quite self-conscious, given that I'm still feeling in the thick of becoming, achieving or developing expertise, but I guess that's the point. So, and also acknowledge the traditional owners where I'm presenting them, sitting here as the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. So the reason, well, I was going to say, what is music psychology first up? I don't know, but maybe we can ask that later. But I guess if we think about my career purpose, fundamentally is to help people, and this is quite a motherhood statement again, Gary McPherson might wrap me over the knuckles with this, but to help people heal suffering and distress that can block the expression of their true self in life, right? So that defines pretty much all that I do. That's my purpose and value in the work that I do. And the musical interpretation of that is to help musicians heal the suffering and distress that can block the expression of their true artistic selves. And I come to that because of my experience when I tried to express myself musically as an adolescent. It was, I'm going to date myself here, but it was way back in the 80s, and it was nothing about performance psychology or anything like that. It was about just put your time on the instrument, learn your skills, get competent on that, and your performance will be fine. And that is not what happened. So it was very much a kind of choking experience, if we think about the reasons for that, that relates to, I guess, the instruments and what I was performing at the time. But if we take a step back from that for a moment and just pause and think, oh, maybe I'll get back to it later. If we're on that stream, sorry, this is all a bit loose. But as performing in the high school certificate in year 12, and it was a question of my connections with the instrument, particularly clarinet, not being the greatest. And I think as I was preparing for this, there's a podcast by Virginia Trioli called, Virginia Trioli is a journalist with the ABC. And she has a podcast called You Don't Know Me. And she interviews sort of prominent people and asks seven questions that, can prompt very unusual answers, things we didn't know about people. And one of them was, things would be different if, or a turning point in the road was, or the road not taken was. And I think it would be very different for me. My story would be different telling you this if I'd gotten into flute lessons way back in year 5 in the UK instead of clarinet, because we could choose one of 3 instruments, right? Woodwind. And I really wanted flute because it was graceful and elegant and beautiful. And oboe was second because it reminded me of the birds in far north Queensland where I was from, which you didn't have in the UK. And then the last one was clarinet. I got that. And I never liked I never liked the physicality of playing it, how I looked playing it. It just, but I persisted through to year 12. I also took up classical singing and did whatever I could to get training and develop that as quick as possible. So the performance was fine. I got through it, but it was anxiety provoking. It's like, oh, this is not. So the clarinet goes in the case, never touch it again. And there are themes that come through my story that also came up in a panel for the Global Arts and Psychology seminar that we ran early September about creating your research pathways, where we had Genevieve Dingle, Jen Blackwell and Solange Glasser, and some 3 themes came up, and they were serendipitous meanderings. So they've gotten to where they are because of weird stumbly luck, as Jen called it, or saying yes to pretty much everything, which was what Solange was doing. Do you come from a small town was another key thing. They all came from a small town, and so did I. And the third thing was trailblazing. So tenacious trailblazing, making your own path. Anyway, back to this. The serendipitous luck moments, as I'm writing my music psychology career and thinking about this, it's like, oh, the serendipitous luck moment 1 was taking classical singing lessons again in my early 20s, getting into honours in psychology at the same time. My singing teacher was starting his PhD in music performance anxiety and opera singers with a supervisor who was Professor Ross Menzies, who any of you who know the AACBT, so he's a renowned clinical psychologist in anxiety, particularly OCD. And chatting with him, he said, oh, look, I can train you to be a psychologist, and also you can start your research, do a PhD in music performance anxiety in young people, because nothing had been done really. There were 6 articles because I was doing research assistant work for my singing teacher. Anyway, I was like, oh, brilliant. Okay, so that started. And then after a couple of years, got registered, but it wasn't really going anywhere. I was like, Then Diana Kenny took me under her wing after she saw me present at a school postgrad symposium. Okay. So revamped research question, and then submitting with a PhD, which back then in the 2007 was pretty unusual to have 5 published papers as part of your PhD. That was a real sort of benefit to progress, I guess, with my career. And the serendipitous luck moment 3 was bumping into Gary McPherson in the lunch line of not 2, but 3 co-badged conferences in Porto in 2005, SciPem/ESCOM/SEMPRE. Now I know from running conferences how monumental that was, those 4 organisers. And he said, oh, look, come with me to Illinois. I've just seen you present. It's great. Come work with me in Illinois. And I said, look, no, just got engaged, about to get married, maybe have kids, in 6 months, not going to work for me. Okay. So then serendipitous moment number 4 comes after I've done the PhD, working in occupational rehabilitation for a couple of years, not really gelling with it, getting really frustrated with workers' comp, and caught up again with my PhD buddy from Sydney Con, who's now Associate Professor Helen Mitchell. And she said, oh, hey, have you seen the AMPS email that's been sent around? So AMPS has come through. It was like, oh, that's... I said, no, because it went through my Sydney University's email account. Oh, Gary McPherson's advertised an ARC postdoc position. Oh, so I got it. She forwarded it to me. And I read it, and it was like opening to the next chapter after my PhD. It was a slightly different area. So that's another thing. Extension, flexibility in extension is how you survive, how you make yourself in this career path. And I applied, and somehow I won it. I don't know. I still don't know quite how or why. But it joined at Melbourne Con, moved to Melbourne at the same time Music, Mind and Wellbeing, the centre or the initiative had started with the collaboration with the Melbourne School of Psychological Sciences and Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. And I think, that's a serendipitous moment. I think it's number 4 or 5 or whatever it is at this point. But that, so that again, it's like music and psychology have always been interwoven, and the reason I've started and then how it's propelled me to be where I am. Then he won another ARC. So he won one ARC, Creating Musical Futures in Australian Schools and Communities. Did that. Happened to win another ARC after that, Optimizing Musical Expertise. Whoa. And again, a stretch. So into motivation, performance quality, and elite music performance, with both of them with crack teams of music psychologists and music educators. I don't come from a music education background, but I've stretched into it with research. And Gary was the head of the con at the time. So that's another serendipity in the sense of, oh, he's realized there's people here that are good. We've got to try and keep them. And he was able to create some positions that I could be placed in. At least in one of them, in music performance science, which was a new position. So there's benefits from, there's a lot of right place, right time stuff. And there's a lot of being just going in and just flying blind a little. And and hoping to see how you go. And then with being at the university and then stretching into teaching as well. So I think, so if I look back, and I'm going to close off in a minute because I realize we're going to hear about Mary, which is much more interesting than me because I'm a bit of a, hack musician at the beginning, but, it's like, I had 3 qualifications that underpinned how I've gotten to be where I am and where I hope to continue. So the PhD was for research, the professional qualification to be a psychologist, and the third one is the Graduate Certificate of University Teaching, which is teaching, right? So there's 8 careers across 5 discipline areas. Hold on. So after school, it was receptionist, secretary, executive assistant work. Never wasted. None of what you do is ever wasted. It kind of moves fluidly into one into the other, right? And then research assistant throughout the undergrad and then after graduating. So research assistants and project management. Household survey management for the government. Who knew? Public household surveys, but survey management, that's what we do in our job. So that was useful. The 4th one, human resource management. I'm in the Bureau of Statistics. Oh, it's a bit dull and dry after a while. I've just become registered as a psychologist. There's a human resources department. We have occupational rehabilitation. We have people off work sick for physical and psychological injury. That's a bit interesting. So then that moved into rehabilitation counselling, career counselling, still as a psychologist. So they're the 7. And then 8 was back to academia doing research, but at a more advanced level, hopefully. And then also academic teaching, which is its own qualification and its own. So what are we saying? That's, and being here now, I can continue to guide research in music performance anxiety. That was my foundation and still is, into the phenomena, into interventions. Aligned constructs like self-efficacy, confidence, psychological flexibility, self-compassion. The beautiful Sabrina McKenzie is here to helping us do that. So self-compassion for musicians and also as a result of listening to music, so music engagement as a result of working and meeting with Amanda Krause. And above and beyond into music education, optimal musical expertise. And I'll close now to say that just also serendipitously, I was having lunch watching the National Press Club address today. It was the director of Jobs and Skills Australia. I didn't catch his name. But a journalist asking, you know, what's the key? What are you going to tell, you know, the undergrads at this point to, you know, at your university? How do they progress? And he said, be adaptable and follow your passions. And that is something that so many people say, and that's kind of true. And that sums it up for me. So yeah, thank you.
Great, Marg. Thank you so much. There's so much in there to unpack. And, you know, the serendipitous moments, I think, are ones that you can look back on and kind of see them as that in hindsight. But they all, like you say, even if at the time they seem like they're taking you down a dead end, there's always something to gain from every kind of work experience that you have. So, yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. So, Mary, what inspired you to get into music psychology? And can you tell us a bit more about your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, I never intended to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and coming back to the idea of serendipitous moments, I've always called them doors of opportunity. And you at certain times in your life, you are faced with a door of opportunity, and you choose whether you're going to walk through it or not. Just getting back to what you first said about music psychology, I always say psychology of music, because the work that I do is far more aligned with furthering our understanding of how we process music, how we respond to it, how we create it. And I suppose coming from a musical background, I've always had that focus on the music and the cultural product. Well, I hate saying product, but what we do, what we participate in, what we make together, what we share in. So I guess that's where my whole focus is. And I use whatever tools I can from psychology, even some from like sociology. And I love experiments. I love your classic 2x2 experiment. Beautiful. Yeah, to try and answer some questions that we have, because when you're coming from a musical background, I mean, this is, I guess, the impetus for my the start of my career. I was doing my master's degree. So I have a Bachelor of Music in percussion performance, and I had a freelance career for many years. Melissa, you reading my bio has made me realize I need to update that. But anyway, yeah, so I used to, I went to ANAM, I won competitions. I played with ACO as well as, you know, QSO, QPO when it was here. I was principal timpanist of the Canberra Symphony Orchestra for a decade, until I just got bored when we're seeing, you know, oh, here comes the Beethoven again. When you played every single symphony, I just got bored. Anyway, when I was doing my master's degree, Masters of Music in Pedagogy and Performance, I had a teacher who was telling me that you've got to move like this. Well, I was playing a marimba piece, and I was going, really? Because I feel kind of ridiculous doing that. And it got me into this whole world of there were, you know, different schools of thought or approaches to playing. Some which were saying that, you know, you economize on all the movement that you do. Some were saying you have to move in this certain way to change the sound of the instrument. You're dealing with the marimba, you hit the thing and that's the note you get. So all of this additional stuff is probably doing something else. So I got really curious as to that. And I started like digging around in, you know, method books and the ways that we teach kids. And some of it is just plain made up. There is no basis for it whatsoever. But it's just, oh, well, this is the way we've always done things. You follow this technique and you do your long tones and you do this. And a lot of it is, anyway, a lot of it is based on assumption. So I got really interested in this and I finished my degree and I was encouraged to apply for a PhD. I started at the ANU. The first meeting I had with the people in charge there was, the first thing they said was, we have no money for field work. And I went, well, this is a great start, isn't it? And I had, through my mum, now, bless your mums, they're always there for you. My mum was a lecturer in early childhood studies at QUT, and she taught a creative arts and anyway, this module she was doing was on dance. And she came across Kate Stevens in some of the work that she was doing. And she called me and said, Mary, now this lady up there who's doing some really interesting stuff with contemporary dance, and I went, oh right, because I was going down a different path with the movement and the gesture stuff. It wasn't so much a psychological path because I had no background in psych whatsoever. So I yeah, so my dear mum said, would you like me to give her a call for you? And I go, no mum, I think I can do this myself. So I popped up to Sydney and I sat with then senior lecturer Kate Stevens in her office in the School of Psych, and I talked to her about like these ideas about movement and gesture, and she talked to me about, you know, choreographic cognition, and she said, yeah, she'd be happy to be like a co-supervisor. And so I went, okay, that would be great. So I started, you know, working on some stuff. Things weren't going so, I was finding it really challenging to maintain my freelance career, which was a lot of performing. I had, I was teaching, so teaching percussion. I was directing the pre-tertiary percussion program at the ANU and filling in the tertiary area, as well with the undergrads. And it was too much, just too much to manage. And Kate said, you know, we've got some scholarships coming up at Marks. Why don't you apply for one of those to do your PhD? And yeah, we'll support it. So I went, okay, sure. So I bunged something together. I sent it in, and I was doing a tour for Musica Viva. And well, yeah, I was about to set out on one. So we'd done all the prep work. The team was flying in, and the night before we were due to go out on tour, I got sick, and I had never been this sick in my life. It was horrendous. So they postponed the tour by a couple of days. I went to a doctor and they said, oh, it's just cold and flu. Take Panadol and go home, get plenty of rest and drink lots of water. So I dragged myself together. I went out on tour. You know, when you play percussion, you're lifting instruments. I ended up in hospital with, like, you know, fractured ribs, and it was only after the tour ended, and it was like a month or two later, and I still felt so sick. I felt like, I explained it to my doctor, it's like the world is out there and there is a veil between me and the world, and I don't feel part of it. And she said, let's do a blood test. Turns out I had glandular fever. And I'd been misdiagnosed, so I hadn't looked after myself. I was so exhausted. I was heading towards chronic fatigue. And the doctor said, you need to stop everything. And I went, I have no income protection. I have no insurance. And I said, well, can you move home with your parents? I'm going, well, this is great. I'm, you know, in my 20s, heading towards being 30. I'm giving up all of my work, my whole career I've built, to move home to live with mum and dad. I was going, this is terrible. I remember sitting on my couch, just contemplating my life, and then a door opened. I got a letter in the mail that said I'd been given a scholarship to go and do my PhD at Marks, and I went, wow. So I called them and I said, I'm sick, and they said, don't worry, we'll give you take all of your sick leave up front, just get better, and then come and do your PhD with us. And I went, wow, okay, I'm going to walk through that door. So then I ended up, I relocated to Sydney, and I worked with Kate. I had Michael Atherton was one of my co-supervisors in the School of Communication Arts for a while. Then I had Roger Dean. I had a lovely fellow, Stephen Malik, who was a postdoc at Marks at the time as well. But anyway, there was, some movement. Roger came, Stephen left, Michael moved on, but Kate, I stayed with Kate the whole way through. And bless that woman, I remember asking her, like the day I graduated, I said, how can I ever repay you? Because she invested in me. I had no psychology background whatsoever. And she said, just pass it on. And so that's what I continually try to do, is just pass it on. But being at Marks was probably the best place to be. So coming from a music background, I was in with people who had, you know, psych degrees, who were on lots of different trajectories. There were some dancers at the time, people doing, you know, linguistic studies, AI and, you know, machine learning, and it was fascinating. It was a really interesting place to be. Whenever anyone had music questions, they'd come and ask me, because you'd see the fear and, oh, I don't know anything about music. Can you explain this to me? And then I go in and say, what the hell's an ANOVA? How do I do that? And yeah, so reading a lot of textbooks, I sometimes thought, do I need to go back and do a psychology degree? And then over years, Freya Bales was there at the same time, and yeah, and I remember having that discussion with her. And over the years, I went, no, actually, I don't, because I I don't want to go down the path where I need registration. So I don't need to do that. And I know lots of lovely people who do, like Marg, who do wonderful work in that area. And I think if there are people who come to you with questions, some people that you can refer them on to. And so, yeah, my main interest is around perception and cognition. So I got my PhD. I was working in Marx. I was research assistant, then a research officer. I set up the EEG lab there, and a number of sort of psychophysiological experiments for Roger. I was working for him for a while, and then I decided to get married. Well, my then partner, my husband, we weighed up. He had tenure at the ANU, so it's like, who earns more, who's got a more secure job, and it was him. So it's like, okay, and that was like another door. So yeah, but Roger had some really good parting advice, and he said, always take care of your environment, and that was just surround yourself with good people. I've heard other people say it as well, like a very high up researcher has a no dickheads policy. I love that. It's just another way of saying take care of your environment, work with good quality people who do good quality work. Anyway, so that was another door opened. I moved to Canberra and started all over again. And I ended up, happen chance, I went to a presentation at the School of Psych there, and the woman presenting, Romina Palermo, she's in face identity, face recognition research in prosopagnosia. So I didn't, circles had changed. I didn't know anyone there anymore. And I ended up asking her after her talk, I wrote to her and said, I really enjoyed it. Would you be happy to catch up for a coffee? And she said, yes, please. I've just moved to Canberra and I don't know anyone. So we caught up, another door that opened. Turns out we have the same birthday. And so she said, oh, there's a professor here, Eleanor McCone, who's, she needs a research assistant. And she said, would you like me to connect you? I went, sure. So I went and spoke to Eleanor, and she said, right, I love the word. She's very, very blunt. She goes, well, I can't employ you as a postdoc because you don't know anything about the theory in this area, but I can employ you as my research assistant. She said, yeah, you did your PhD with Kate. Good. I know you've got good experimental training. So I ended up running her lab and did a whole heap of experiments on face perception and identity, and ended up co-authoring some of those studies. So that was another moment. I was looking around for postdocs. There was nothing around, absolutely nothing. And I got to the point of, by then I had I was pregnant. I then had my daughter. Life looked okay. I went, well, if this is what it's going to be, then that's fine. I was involved in research. I had my performing going. So I said, if this is my life, that's totally fine. I've got my family. And then there was a postdoc with Jane Davidson that came up at UWA. I almost didn't apply for it because I just thought, I just can't be bothered. And then Jane said, I think you should apply for it. And so I ended up applying for it and got that. That was 2-year postdoc in the School of Music. It was just at the time that Jane had got the Centre of Excellence, and so it was a very high pressured sort of environment, and I didn't get a lot of time with Jane, but the time that I did get, I'm always feeling like I'm a bowerbird. Wherever you are, there is stuff that you can learn from people. And I learned from Jane a lot about strategic sort of things. And yeah, and we worked together, and she was wonderful in saying, right, you need to get this experience under your belt, you need to do this, we need to get you into like doing a bit of the teaching. I got a grant with actually Felicity Baker. I got it because she was it was a collaborative grant, and she was at UQ at the time, and I thought, great, I'll be able to come back to UQ and to, well, Brisbane, because my parents live in Brisbane, and then she moved to Melbourne. So anyway, that so yeah, no, so Jane was really supportive of my career, and having that distance, that difference between having your PhD supervisor, who can be quite you know, dependent on through the research training, to then have that sort of taken away, and it's like, okay, you have to stand on your own 2 feet now, was really really valuable. Anyway, things changed at UWA, and there was another opportunity coming up for a postdoc at in Brisbane at UQ with Margaret Barrett. So yeah, I applied for that, and I got that, and my parents were thrilled to have their daughter and her 2 grandchildren, daughter, husband, and 2 grandchildren now living in Brisbane. So yeah, so that then, talk about stars aligning as well. There are some of these serendipitous moments. Margaret learned so much from her. She's an amazing powerhouse, incredible. But in terms of like seeing opportunities, thinking creatively about how you can leverage those opportunities into something else. So she managed to create a position that that I applied for and was lucky enough to get. And that was, yeah, going, you know, staying within a school of music. And I have thought over the years, where do I belong? Because I've worked in psych departments. I like that environment. I've worked in music. In the end, it's that, you know, working out what your gut tells you is the right place to be. And for me, it's being in a music department and trying to use the interdisciplinary knowledge and skills and ways of communicating across audiences to shine a light on musical practice and the interesting things it teaches us about humanity, about being human and being human with other people. And I think that's really valuable. I mean, we all know what a battering the poor old humanities and arts have had over the past decade to 14 years. So, and yeah, yeah, I think that is probably my purpose in life, is to hold space for that, you know, highlighting of what is music, and using the scientific languages that I have to be able to communicate that value outside or beyond what music is. Yeah, beyond our own discipline. I mean, that was something else. I think it was Kate that told me once. She said, well, if we're always talking to our own discipline, then then yeah, what are we doing? Oh yeah, no, I forgot to say the last thing about AMPs. So thanks for inviting me. I started off at going to AMPs when they were at UNSW on a Friday night. It was Kate, Emery, sometimes James Rennick was there. Yeah, there were a few of us, and we'd all go off to the pub for a drink afterwards.
Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore because we're all over the place.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mary. I wanted to pick up on something that you were saying there. You know, you came from a musical background, as did I, and I don't have a psychology qualification either. And I know that some people come from a psych background but may not have the music practice background, and both can kind of engender their own form of imposter syndrome, I think, in this field. So I guess this is a question for both of you. You know, how necessary or not is it to kind of have those formal qualifications or deep experience in both areas in this field, or do you think that that's, you know, there are ways around that?
I think there are ways around it. I mean, my PhD ended up being in psychology, but I think now, what with, you know, people like myself, with Marg, with, you know, numerous other people who are now supervising PhD projects, it's the quality of the individual and what they bring to the project that is paramount. And I think we are at a stage where we are forging new interdisciplinary ground. I think we benefited from it through patching together careers to start with, but I think over the last decade or 15 years, it's there's more of an acceptance of it as an interdisciplinary discipline. Of course, it depends on how you want to practice and where you want to go afterwards. If you want to go into clinical practice, then of course you have to have, you know, registration. But there's a lot of ways in which you can use your skills and your knowledge and build on them as well. I mean, the whole purpose of research training is that you develop your skills and knowledge. So I think it's, you know, crafted to the project and crafted to the individual as well as their life trajectory.
Marg, did you have any further thoughts on that in terms of those kind of formal qualifications in those areas?
Not other than, gee, isn't it a nice pairing that you've got? Because I'm the opposite. I'm like the strength in psychology and less so music, and the comfort level. What I'm living now is that most of my appointment is in psychology, but still, you know, I inform a lot of musical practice with training and healthy approaches. And but absolutely right, like what do they call it, the soft skills, the highly transferable skills. Music psychology training in undergrad, if you do master's level, PhD, however you study it, gives you so many of those transferable skills. You know, thinking about where you could, like, what careers in psychology, music psychology look like. And, you know, obviously there's academia, which we're both in. And it's interesting, because I just searched, you know, preparing for this. Maybe you did this already, Melissa. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I hope I'm not kind of stealing what you were going to say. But I thought, what's it? You know, music psychologist. What do they do? Because there's not that many, like, in academia, lecturers in music psychology. There's Mary, and there's Solange Glasser. But that's all I know. I mean, I don't know. Nothing else really came up. But there's a lot of us doing it in other ways, like infusing it in our, like, you know, Amanda Krause is infusing it. She's situated within the psychology department, but music psychology research is what she lives and breathes. Hi, Amanda. I know you're here, and I'm talking about you in the third person. You know, so there's academia, which, you need a PhD. There's private industry. You need good writing practice, research and planning skills, experimental design. Love that 2x2. Have it as an entree. Interpersonal and organizational skills, right? They're really prized for media, marketing, all sorts of things. Education. So music training, music education, music development, it's a ton of developmental psychology, educational psychology principles. So you can use that to step into some educational, you know, music performance teaching, for example, that we do. There's also, of course, clinical practice in health and therapy. I've gotten off track now, but wherever these go, it's highly individualized, really, and that's the flexibility element.
Just on the clinical side of things, Marg, I mean, what opportunities do you see in that space? I'm actually talking to people at my university who train the clinical, they train that the students in that clinical stream. And we're toying with the idea of introducing some, I guess, like they're calling them kind of alternative interventions, but, you know, teaching those students about music and other alternative therapies. Do you see that field is open to that kind of thing, or has it traditionally been? I mean, because I'm not from that world. You know, what are the opportunities, if any, in that space? For people with like a music background, or an interest in background.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can do courses in music psychology, but to do it as a more fundamental, solid aspect of your professional work is moving into specialized music therapy training.
Yeah,
you're not going to get that through clinical psychology training or professional psychology training. You could integrate it. If you did take the psychology path, you could integrate it and try it out with your clients, but you wouldn't be taking a musical intervention subject, for example, and not even like a general basic intervention subject. You're not going to get that in the professional psychology training route at most universities. What you're doing, we're talking about, Melissa, is quite groundbreaking. that wouldn't happen with Melbourne, for example.
No, but I guess your own clinical practice, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are more dealing with people who are performing musicians and not just the general population, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I wouldn't be using musical interventions with them. It depends what they're presented with.
Yeah.
But typically anxiety then, and then and performance psychology, mental skills, etc. Yeah.
I think there's also there are opportunities for partnership. So, you know, I chose not to be, you know, not to do a psychology degree, not to go through that training, because I don't want to be a clinical psych. Likewise, I don't want to be a music therapist. Does that say something about me and helping people? But I you know, respect those traditions, and what I'm interested in and the way that I've geared my music psychology work is to what you can do, like around understanding how people respond and process music. You can help with the theoretical development that is the foundation for what therapists or practitioners apply as they work with clients. I mean, I had a whole career of teaching music for like 15 or so years, and I feel like I've done that one-on-one interaction with another human being in a space working towards some sort of goal. In my sense, it was like a musical goal, but you're always dealing with, you know, the person as well as the music. And I went, I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to be a music therapist, but I really love the research side of things. And I can do the sort of research that is useful and partner with other professionals who can then apply the interventions using their sorts of skills. We did as an example, okay, so always having your blinkers off, your radar up for any opportunity there is. I ran into someone I've known as my sister's childhood friend at the local shops, who happens to work at the big. She's a speech pathologist, works at the big children's hospital. She works with the director of the children's hospital, and this person has a keen interest in this particular outpatients clinic where they work with children with Rett syndrome. And I didn't know anything about Rett syndrome, but I knew this person, and they were interested in what they could do musically with the kids that come in, how they could engage them to try and reduce things like anxiety, because they not just with procedural support, but they come in with they're always having procedures done. They're always anxious about being in the hospital environment. So I then, it must be about a year to get the project up and running, because I had to go and talk to, had a meeting with like a couple of the music therapists there, who were a little bit afraid of me, I think, because they thought I was going to come in and do music. And it's like, and it did take quite a few conversations. Also, I mean, the history of the School of Music, it did have a music therapy program for a while, which was discontinued. So within the community, there were practitioners out there who'd gone through the program or been involved in it and had, you know, held it close to their heart. And I was the new person who'd kind of come in. So all of those soft skills that you talk about in the meetings, to reassure people that you're not trying to do what they do. I have no interest in doing that. I admire what you do and the way you work with some really challenging clients and help them to achieve, you know, certain goals. Anyway, we ended up getting this project together, had a wonderful music therapist who was also a registered teacher, and she was the most fabulous registered music teacher, like classroom music. And with that like combined skill set, working with children's in that environment, she was the best person to do it. So we designed, we also were working with hospital nursing staff to do physiological measurement techniques, heart rate variability, and with the kiddies when they came in. We worked with the therapist, the wonderful Karen, to devise a program that gave us some sort of control for looking at the different activities that were used, some insights into how she approached it. We also had a clinical psychologist on the team who did interviews with the children and the parents. So it was a really it was a lovely project to be involved in. And as a music psychologist, you come in with specialist knowledge and skills that other people don't have. And likewise, they've got other sorts of knowledge and skills that you don't have. And it's sensitively conjoining them all together in a way that you can do something good. I hate using the UQ, create change in the world, but do something innovative and different that respects all of the traditions involved, as well as the practice and the doing of music.
Thanks, Mary. I think you're picking up on a lot of themes that we've actually kind of dealt with throughout the year in this series. And, the last session was all about, well, it was called networking, but it was really more about building relationships. And, what you said, that example that you just gave there just demonstrates how important it is to make those connections, particularly with people who have a skill set that's very different to yours, because then you become complementary. And that's when really interesting things can happen. Just want to throw it out to the group to see if anyone wanted to ask a question at this point, or put your hand up or put something in the chat. Make any comments? No? I'm going to ask a question about what do you see as the challenges for, young or early career researchers in this space at the moment? What's challenging? Because I think the funding environment is one that's really, really challenging for everybody. But yeah, just keen to get your thoughts on that, Marg or Mary.
Well, with funding, that feeds into, I guess, funding in academic terms, as there's limited positions in academia. Mm-hmm. So you need to be creative and integrate music psychology research into your generalist role, whatever that role there is. Is it music education or music psychology? I had to do that myself.
I've got a colleague who's working as a learning advisor, and she's got a PhD in music and jazz improvisation, but she's managing to weave that in, in creative ways into her role. So I think that's a really great point, Marg. Yeah.
Another, that comes to mind is there's no professional, I guess, but it depends what you want to do with it, but there's no professional certification. I don't know if that would help or not, but what was that? So yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know if it would be if it could help at all, possibly not, but I love, Mary, what you were saying about, that ability to weave and integrate with other professions, and it sounds like a gorgeous project.
We do have a comment in the chat from Irene. She says, in my case, I have a degree in musicology, and as much as I've tried to connect with a music psych environment here in Spain, there isn't much more on that. So I thought maybe getting into a psych degree could be a starter as a way to combine them and get into research, but I don't know if this would be the best way. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Actually, I've just in Spain, whereabouts in Spain? Because I've just got a colleague who's like moved there this week. She was here at UQ, then she went. She was in Italy, but she's doing a postdoc, a Marie Curie thing at Barcelona. Anyway, yeah. So I'm just putting that out there because Chiara, we were involved in another project last year, which was looking at songwriting with culturally and linguistically diverse participants in a region of Queensland. And Chiara was involved. She's from a social science, social network background. So another one of these crazy projects where you have people from all sorts of different, composers and doing artistic research. And then we've got this, the sociology perspective, music psychology. Anyway, I'm getting a bit long-winded, but so she is like working in that kind of area, through the ongoing collaborations that we have in music psychology. So anyway, look up Chiara Brocchiatelli. I think she's.
Could you put it in the chat?
Yeah.
Could you put the name in the chat? Thanks for that. Susie, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I just had a question. I'm a psychologist and I've worked in that space for a very long time, and I'm very new to the academic space. And I guess I'm really interested in looking at music therapeutically in practice. And I know there's music therapy, and I understand that music psychology perhaps is focused on performance, and there's that education component as well. But I guess I'm interested in the well-being space, and I don't know much of what's out there, and so I'm curious if there is something, protocols around, interventions or therapeutic interventions in the general population in that kind of setting, if that makes sense.
If you're going to claim that you're doing music therapy, you have to be a registered therapist. Like if you're going to deliver some kind of,
yes,
and of course, yeah.
Yeah, so not, but I mean, in psychology, I think it's an intervention that is, I think, has great efficacy, and have been using for a long time myself, but not in a music therapy kind of way. And I just wondered if in psychology that exists.
Jen Dingle's done quite a bit of work with developing programs like emotion regulation for teenagers through music listening.
Great.
Some work with oldies, and we were doing some work together on a choir for developing, belonging for international students. So yeah, no, Jen is probably Diana, you know Jen better than all of us. Anyway, but yeah, she does some really lovely interventions, designed to achieve certain things, and it's but yeah, there's she has written up some protocols for the sorts of things that she's done, so that might be useful.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
We've got another comment in the chat. Thanks, Susie. Greetings from Mark's Music Science Group. I'm a first-year PhD student. This talk has been truly inspiring for me. That's great to hear. Thank you very much for this experience, which motivated me more for what I aim to do, especially being from a psychology background with no formal music training. I had a similar experience, and it's great to see that I'm not alone thinking about these issues. And the question is, what do you think about pursuing a postdoc or not if you're looking for an academic career? What are the pros and cons, and are there any cons? Before I throw to either Mary or Margaret, just want to say that we do have a whole recording about postdocs on our YouTube channel that you can go and watch, so please check that out. But yeah, Mary, Marg, any thoughts on postdocs and pros and cons if you're looking to pursue an academic career?
Pro?
Yeah, it's great if you can get one.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing that I can think of, I remember when I graduated, I had my PhD, I was looking around for postdocs and applying for everything under the sun. And someone said to me, if you want to stay in Australia, look to build your career in Australia. And I remember at the time there were others who had, gone overseas, who then wanted to come back to Australia and then found it more difficult. So I think the longer the time that you spend out of the country, it's that whole thing about your environment. It starts to shape who you are and the sort of work that you can do. I think Australia definitely has a research agenda, or a sort of a lens that you have to tap into if you want to try and win those big grants. Of course, it is a very difficult funding environment, but it took me years to work out that no one's ever going to fund body movement. The thing that I got really expert at in my PhD, no one's ever going to fund that. So you have to find creative ways that you can look at who you are, what's your skill set, have your antennas out for what is the landscape, and then find strategic ways to wedge yourself into that landscape.
Marg, did you have any final thoughts on that?
No, not that's other than that's been said. Yeah.
Looks like we're almost out of time. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So I would like to ask both of you to, what are your kind of, if you had any kind of parting advice for people who are really interested in trying to make a go of this field in whatever sense, do you have any advice for people on the call today? Marg?
Reach out to people, make connections like you're doing here, attending sorts of sessions. Reach out, get involved, and
I think becoming involved in this society is really a great first step if you're not already involved. It's free to join. It's a great group of people, very, very supportive. And if you reached out to anyone in the society and wanted to get more information or talk or whatever, most people I'm sure would be very, very happy to hear from you. So can't say enough good things about AMPS. So do join if you're not already a member. Mary, did you have any parting words of wisdom for us today?
I don't know if I've got any parting words of wisdom.
In addition to the ones you've already given us.
Reach out to people. Do good work. And you'll find that like people who are more senior, it's such a lovely community. They're always willing to help and support where they can. AMPS, music psychology or psychology of music, whatever you want to say, it's a lovely Australian, but also a lovely global, international community, and very supportive, I think, in a lot of, more so than you see in some other areas. So, and go with your gut. Your gut will tell you if you are on your path with your unique gifts to the world. And I think go with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you both of you for your time this afternoon. It's been wonderful to hear about your experiences. I've gotten a lot out of this as well. So thank you to both of you, Mary and Marg. This is the last session for this year, but do keep an eye out for what's happening next year. My dogs are really losing it now in the background, so it's time for me to go. I hope you can't hear that. But thank you all for joining us. This will be, it's been recorded and it will be put up on our YouTube channel. So go and check out all of the recordings from our past sessions. So big round of applause. Thank you to Margaret Osborne and Mary Broughton for being with us today. All right. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Bye.
Okay. Bye.